What if I told you that 3 men walked this earth and never experienced death? That they lived among us, yet the finality that touches every human being did not claim them? Their names are etched in the sacred pages of Scripture, their stories whispered across generations, and their lives shine as timeless examples of God's extraordinary power. Enoch, Elijah, and Melchizedek are not merely historical figures, they are living mysteries, divine exceptions, and eternal reminders that God's ways surpass all human understanding. To comprehend their stories is to glimpse the infinite, to understand the extraordinary reach of faith, and to witness the divine hand that can lift a life above the ordinary course of mortality. The seventh from Adam, walked with God. Genesis tells us Enoch walked faithfully with God, then he was no more, because God took him away. Imagine a life so intertwined with the divine that death itself could not claim it. He lived in a world filled with the early descendants of Adam, a period marked by both innocence and growing corruption. Yet, Enoch's life stands apart, radiant with righteousness, a soul in constant communion with God. He was a father to Methuselah, and through his lineage, the promise of salvation and redemption flowed. His 365 years on earth were not just a measurement of time but a symbol of completeness, harmony, and divine purpose. Was not through violence or struggle, but through purity of heart and unwavering devotion. He walked with God, and God simply lifted him from the earthly realm, a rare act that would mark him forever in the annals of sacred history. Consider for a moment what it means to walk with God. It is not merely adherence to commandments, nor the fulfillment of ritual. It is a life so attuned to the divine that the world itself becomes secondary. Every step, every thought, every word reflects a harmony with the Creator. Enoch's life invites reflection. What does it mean to live so faithfully that even death cannot touch you? In this, he becomes a precursor, a symbol of hope and of God's ability to defy the natural order for those whose hearts are fully aligned with him. And then there is Elijah, the prophet of fire, a man whose very presence seemed to challenge the earthly order. His life unfolded in turbulent times, when kings and rulers often turned from God, and the people of Israel were drawn to false idols. Elijah appeared as a voice of warning, courage, and divine power. He confronted King Ahab and Queen Jezebel, standing against oppression, idolatry, and corruption. Through him, fire rained from heaven, the widow's son was revived, and the power of God was made visible to all who doubted. His miracles were not for display alone, they were reminders that the living God acts in the world, that faith can command even the elements, and that obedience to God carries divine authority. But Elijah's most breathtaking moment came not in the acts of fire he performed, but in the way he departed this earth. The scriptures recount that a chariot of fire, drawn by horses ablaze, came down in a whirlwind, and Elijah was taken up into heaven. Imagine the scene, a man rising from the mortal plane, enveloped by divine light, leaving behind a world that could not contain him. His disciple Elisha watched, a witness to the impossible. This moment became an enduring symbol. When God wills, even death can be overturned. Elijah's story echoes through time, his ascent a promise that God's faithful servants may transcend the boundaries of life and death. Melchizedek, the king of righteousness, stands as perhaps the most enigmatic of all. Appearing suddenly in Genesis as the king of Salem and priest of God Most High, he blesses Abraham and receives tithes, acts that would seem ordinary if not for the profound mysteries surrounding him. Scripture tells us nothing of his genealogy, nothing of his birth or death. Hebrews describes him as without father or mother, without genealogy, without beginning of days or end of life. This man exists in the pages of the Bible as both a human and a divine symbol, a figure whose presence bridges the gap between earthly rule and heavenly priesthood. His life, or perhaps his eternal existence, points to the ultimate priesthood, one that surpasses all human measure, prefiguring the eternal priesthood of Christ. What unites these 3 men is more than their defiance of death. Each embodies an aspect of God's extraordinary plan for humanity. Enoch represents intimate fellowship with God, the soul perfected in devotion. Elijah represents the power and majesty of divine intervention. Melchizedek represents the eternal priesthood. Together, they reveal the depths of God's wisdom, the range of his mercy, and the heights of his glory. As we reflect on these stories, it is impossible not to consider the spiritual lessons they offer. In a world consumed by the inevitability of death, these 3 men remind us that God can lift those who are wholly committed to him beyond the ordinary. They challenge us to pursue righteousness, to cultivate faith that transcends human limitation, and to seek lives that are so attuned to God's will that they echo eternity itself. Their stories are not merely historical accounts, they are invitations to a higher understanding of life, death, and divine purpose. Enoch's life teaches us about constant communion with God, showing that a faithful walk can draw the attention and favor of the Almighty. Elijah's fiery departure reminds us that God's power is unmatched and that his servants can witness the miraculous when their hearts are wholly devoted. Melchizedek embodies the eternal priesthood, a life of righteousness and peace that prefigures the ultimate reconciliation between humanity and God. Each of these figures offers a glimpse of eternity, a testament to the truth that God's plans surpass human understanding and the natural laws that govern our world. Even as we ponder their lives, questions arise. How did God transport them beyond death? Were they transformed in ways incomprehensible to the human mind? Or were they preserved as living examples of His extraordinary power? While Scripture does not provide explicit answers, the mystery itself serves a purpose. It draws our attention to the divine, urging us to contemplate the infinite, and reminds us that the ways of God are not constrained by the limitations of mortality. The legacy of these men continues to resonate across generations. They serve as spiritual beacons, guiding humanity toward faith, courage, and righteousness. Their lives invite reflection on how we, too, might walk faithfully, seek divine purpose, and live in alignment with God's will. They are reminders that even in the face of life's fleeting nature, the eternal is within reach for those who seek it earnestly. Enoch, Elijah, and Melchizedek leave us with a profound sense of wonder. Their stories challenge our understanding of what it means to live, to serve, and to transcend. They remind us that God's power is not limited to the ordinary and that His favor can elevate a life above what we perceive as possible. These men never died, not because they were invincible, but because their lives were wholly aligned with God's purpose. They serve as eternal witnesses to His glory, inviting all who encounter their stories to consider the profound mysteries of faith, devotion, and divine power. Even today, their presence lingers in our consciousness. Enoch's communion, Elijah's fiery ascent, and Melchizedek's eternal priesthood challenge us to ponder the unseen, to reflect on the depths of spiritual possibility, and to seek lives that honor God in ways that transcend mere survival. They inspire us to believe that through faith, devotion, and righteous living, there exists a path beyond the ordinary, a path that leads to eternity itself. As we continue to reflect on the lives of Enoch, Elijah, and Melchizedek, we begin to see not only the extraordinary events that defined them, but also the spiritual truths that their lives reveal. Enoch's life invites contemplation of a soul wholly devoted to God, living in constant fellowship and walking daily with divine presence. Every moment of his existence reflected obedience, purity, and alignment with the Creator's will. His ascent into heaven without experiencing death is not merely an act of divine favoritism, but a symbol of what can happen when a human life is perfectly attuned to God's purpose. In Enoch, we see a foreshadowing of the hope offered to all who seek God earnestly, that faithfulness has its reward, and that eternity is within reach for those who walk in harmony with the divine. Elijah's story continues to remind us of the incredible power of God working through His chosen servants. In a world of corruption, false idols, and moral decay, Elijah stood as a bold witness to the living God. His miracles were a manifestation of divine authority, demonstrating that God's will cannot be thwarted by human opposition. When he was taken up into heaven by a fiery chariot, it was not only an escape from earthly persecution, but also a vivid sign of divine favor. Through this act, God showed that human limitations do not bind him, and that the faithful may be elevated above the ordinary course of life. Elijah's story teaches us that courage, obedience, and unwavering faith can invite the miraculous into our lives, and that God's intervention is always possible when hearts are devoted fully to Him. Melchizedek, the eternal priest and king of Salem, adds another dimension to this divine narrative. Unlike Enoch and Elijah, Melchizedek's origins and destiny remain shrouded in mystery. Scripture provides no genealogy, no record of birth, and no account of death. He appears as both a king and a priest, a dual role that signifies spiritual authority and divine blessing. In blessing Abraham and receiving tithes, Melchizedek demonstrates the primacy of righteousness and faithfulness over lineage and earthly power. His existence prefigures the eternal priesthood of Christ, emphasizing that God's kingdom operates on principles that surpass human understanding. Melchizedek embodies peace, justice, and spiritual permanence, offering a vision of a life fully aligned with divine purpose and timeless in its significance. Together, these three men form a powerful testimony to the extraordinary ways in which God can work in the world. They defy death, yet their stories are not merely about physical survival. They are about the transformation of the soul, the elevation of faith, and the demonstration of divine authority in human history. Each serves as a unique example. Enoch exemplifies devotion and intimate fellowship with God, Elijah embodies courage and miraculous intervention, Melchizedek represents eternal righteousness and spiritual authority. Their lives reveal the many ways in which God interacts with His creation, reminding us that His plans are far beyond human comprehension. The lessons from these lives extend beyond the biblical text, challenging us to consider how we approach our own lives and faith. Are we walking with God as Enoch did, seeking daily communion and striving for righteousness? Do we have the courage and obedience exemplified by Elijah, willing to stand against worldly opposition for the sake of divine truth? Can we aspire to the spiritual integrity and eternal perspective of Melchizedek, seeking God's kingdom above all else? These questions invite deep reflection, guiding us toward lives of purpose, devotion, and alignment with the eternal. In addition to their spiritual significance, these figures serve as reminders of God's mastery over life and death. Death is often viewed as the ultimate boundary, the final conclusion of human existence. Yet in the stories of Enoch, Elijah, and Melchizedek, God demonstrates that He is not constrained by human limitations. He has the power to elevate, transform, and preserve those who are faithful. This truth provides both comfort and challenge, comfort in the knowledge that God's favor can surpass mortality, and challenge in the call to live lives that are worthy of such divine attention. Moreover, these stories encourage a sense of wonder and awe, reminding us that the universe is not merely a collection of random events, but a creation imbued with purpose and guided by divine wisdom. The miraculous ascensions, the mysterious priesthood, and the intimate fellowship with God serve as windows into the spiritual realities that exist beyond our perception. They invite us to look beyond the ordinary, to seek the extraordinary, and to recognize that God's hand is at work in ways that may be hidden, yet profoundly real. Throughout history, these three men have inspired countless generations. Their lives have been recounted in sermons, studied in theological texts, and contemplated in private devotion. They have become symbols of faithfulness, courage, and divine favor. In a world often marked by uncertainty, their stories provide anchors of hope, reminding believers that God's promises are real, His power is supreme, and His purpose is eternal. As we reflect on their lives, we are also reminded that eternity is not merely a distant hope, but a present reality for those who walk with God. Enoch's ascent, Elijah's fiery departure, and Melchizedek's eternal priesthood illustrate the profound truth that God can bring His faithful servants into a state of existence that transcends human understanding. These stories are invitations to a deeper spiritual life, encouraging believers to pursue faith with earnestness, to cultivate righteousness, and to seek alignment with God's will in every aspect of their lives. The significance of these men extends into the broader narrative of salvation history. Enoch's lineage connects to Noah, linking the pre-flood world to God's covenant with humanity. Elijah's life foreshadows the coming of the Messiah, pointing to the ultimate redemption offered through Christ. Melchizedek serves as a type of Christ, a figure whose eternal priesthood prefigures the eternal mediation of Jesus for humanity. In this way, the lives of these three men are not isolated events, but integral threads in the divine tapestry of redemption and grace. Even in our modern context, the stories of Enoch, Elijah, and Melchizedek hold profound relevance. They challenge us to reconsider our understanding of life, death, and divine possibility. They inspire us to live with intention, to cultivate faith that is deep and abiding, and to seek lives that honor God above all else. Their examples remind us that the extraordinary is possible when we align our hearts with the divine. Through faith, we too can experience glimpses of eternity in our mortal journey. In the end, the stories of these three men leave us with a sense of awe, reverence, and inspiration. They remind us that God's ways are beyond comprehension, that His power can transcend the natural order, and that His favor can lift a faithful life above the ordinary. Enoch, Elijah, and Melchizedek invite us to walk in faith, to embrace courage, and to pursue righteousness, knowing that God's presence is always with those who seek Him earnestly. Their lives stand as enduring testimonies to the possibilities of divine interaction in the human world. They challenge us to aspire toward a higher standard of living, to cultivate a relationship with God that is unwavering, and to embrace the mysteries of His plan with humility and wonder. They remind us that the stories of the past are not merely historical accounts, but living lessons that continue to shape the spiritual journey of every believer. And so, as we close our reflection on these extraordinary men, we are left with the knowledge that the divine is not distant. The miraculous is not impossible, and eternity is within reach for those who walk faithfully with God. Enoch, Elijah, and Melchizedek never experienced death because their lives were wholly aligned with the Creator, serving as eternal witnesses to His glory, power, and mercy. They invite us to live in a way that honors the eternal, to pursue faith with courage, and to recognize that with God, all things are possible. Their stories challenge us, inspire us, and uplift us, leaving an indelible mark on the soul. They remind us that life, when lived in harmony with God's purpose, transcends the limitations of the earthly realm. They demonstrate that God's favor can lift the faithful into the extraordinary, and that His presence is a guiding light for those who seek righteousness. In contemplating their lives, we are called to deepen our faith, strengthen our devotion, and embrace the eternal possibilities that God offers. In the quiet moments of reflection, one cannot help but feel the weight of their significance. Enoch, taken into heaven without death; Elijah, ascending in a whirlwind of fire; Melchizedek, eternal priest and king, each embodies a facet of divine truth, a manifestation of God's power, and a symbol of what is possible for those who seek Him with unwavering hearts. They remind us that God's plan is perfect, His wisdom is infinite, and His power can elevate a life beyond the ordinary. As we conclude this journey through the lives of these remarkable men, let us carry their lessons with us. Let us walk faithfully, as Enoch did; let us stand courageously, as Elijah did; let us pursue righteousness and peace, as Melchizedek exemplified. Their lives are not just stories of the past, but living invitations to align ourselves with God's eternal purpose. They show us that when a life is wholly devoted to God, death is not the end, but a doorway into the eternal presence of the Almighty. May we be inspired by their faith, emboldened by their courage, and guided by their example? And may we, too, seek to walk faithfully with God, knowing that in Him, all things are possible, and that a life devoted to His will carries the promise of eternity. The stories of Enoch, Elijah, and Melchizedek endure, not merely as historical accounts, but as eternal beacons of faith, courage, and divine favor, calling us to live with purpose, devotion, and hope in the eternal God who holds all things in His hands.